Now, it's been such a long time that I'm a little bit concerned that I may have forgotten how to do these updates, but after an international break and then a weekend where it was only FA Cup games, Liverpool are finally back in action tomorrow, and it is, of course, a big one, a Merseyside derby against Everton at Anfield coming up. And as usual, I've been here at the AXA Training Centre to hear from Arne Slot ahead of that game, and so much to get into after what has been such a long break as well. It's so unusual you get those in the season, isn't it? And so plenty of talking points coming into this one, and I think the obvious starting point is, of course, those suggestions that Trent Alexander-Arnold is closing in on a move to Real Madrid, or getting closer to at least agreeing that move anyway. So many reports around that over the break, and real momentum building up in terms of that potential move. And of course, Arne Slot was the first question he's asked about. We hadn't had a chance to speak to him for 2.5 weeks, and so this was top of the agenda really, and the first questions he was asked were centred on this topic. And unsurprisingly, given a bit of a masterclass in avoiding a question from Arne Slot. He hasn't really given up much, has he, over these contracts over the course of this season, and he wasn't really going to give much away in terms of this one either, was he, today? So not surprised by that at all. But the direct quote when he was asked about Trent and all those reports was, his situation is unfortunately that he's injured and he's fully focused on his recovery now. He obviously didn't give much away in terms of that, so the follow-up was another attempt to get him to maybe say something on this, and he was asked, look, does this affect you at all, these reports and this situation that seems to be moving towards Trent Alexander-Arnold going to Real Madrid? And he said, no, it's been talked about throughout the entire season and I haven't really let that noise affect me. And he said, I'm more interested in talking about or thinking about the noise that's been around the PSG and Newcastle defeats and how disappointing they were. So he kind of derailed that question and took it in a totally different direction, so that he didn't have to speak about Trent, but that he could focus on the challenges and the difficulties that Liverpool have had recently in terms of performance. He wasn't happy with the performance against Newcastle. He was happy against PSG, but not with the result. And he wanted to talk more about that really than the situation for Trent Alexander-Arnold. He also said of Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah as well that their focus, they are fully fit. Their focus is fully on the game that's coming up against Everton and nothing else really. So it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, he had an opportunity there, I guess, if there was no truth to the fact that Trent had agreed this move or was closing in on it, and that if he had any confidence that Trent was going to sign a new contract, he did have the opportunity to kind of shoot it down there and then, didn't he? And say, I'm confident they'll stay, I want him to stay, or something like that. But he didn't do that. It's maybe more of an answer actually you would have expected from Jurgen Klopp. I think he would be able, in his role as manager rather than head coach, to be more forthright about these things. But Arne Slot, he much preferred to kind of dodge the question, as I said. So, maybe that tells you the differences between a head coach and a manager. And maybe also it gives us a little bit of a hint as to where Trent is up to with this situation. I don't think that we've seen from Slot or from anyone around the club really the same confidence that we've seen around Van Dijk and Mo Salah. Very much a feeling in there at the AXA Training Centre that those two will be signed up, but haven't never really had that same confidence around Trent. And I think the manager reflects that in just completely wanting to avoid that question, not talk about it at all, and to talk about other matters, including recent results. So maybe we're reading too much into it, but that's the vibe I certainly got from his answer. Now, of course, he did actually get an opportunity to talk about football and the actual game itself that's coming up, and we maybe should focus a little bit more on that rather than speculation over the future of players. And I think the interesting one coming into this is who's going to be available. Of course, there's a few international break injuries, a few withdrawals from national teams, and of course a few injuries that Liverpool had prior to the break. Now, Slot effectively confirmed in his answer that Trent Alexander-Arnold won't be available for this one. He's still focusing on his recovery from the injury he picked up against PSG, so not available to face Everton, which I think is no bad thing for him in terms of maybe he would get a bad reception from the crowd when he does next play. So that's going to be postponed for a little while. And in terms of other availability, of course, we saw Ryan Gravenberch withdraw from international duty with the Netherlands, but apparently he is okay. That was the expectation. He got a knock in the final against Newcastle, but he's recovered from that, and it was enough to keep him out of the international break. But he's trained the last couple of days, so he should be available for this one. Becker has also been back in training after sustaining a concussion while representing Brazil. The one thing Slot did say about this is there's just a final check they have to do on him today to make sure that he can play and be available. But that, of course, is part of those concussion protocols that they follow. I'm not expecting that they'll find anything untoward there. And I would expect that Alisson, given the fact he's been training, given they've been checking him every other day to make sure he's okay, I would expect him to be available. So a boost on those fronts in terms of those two. And I would expect them both to be in the starting lineup. And of course, we're a bit short of right backs at the moment, aren't they, Liverpool, with Trent Alexander-Arnold being out, Joe Gomez still being out. He was doing some individual training today, but not available for this one. So it would be a boost, wouldn't it, if Liverpool did have an orthodox right back available and didn't have to use Jarell Quansah there. Well, the good news is that Conor Bradley has been back in training, doing parts of individual work today, this week, and also joining in some parts of team training as well. But in terms of whether he's going to be available for this one or not, it's a little bit touch and go by the sounds of things. Arne Slot said, look, it's a repetitive injury. He's had that muscle issue before, hasn't he? So we have to make smart decisions. But he has been involved in training. There's maybe a chance there he's involved. Could he even just make the squad? I still think that would be a boost to have him for the final half an hour or so, because I just don't think Quansah's a perfect fit at right back, is he? I think if you can get Bradley on the pitch at any point, it would be good to do that. But of course, they don't want to take any risks. They don't want a re-injury there. With it being a muscle, you've got to really take care of that. So we'll see what decision they do make on that one in the end. And just to wrap up the team news there as well, Ibrahim Konate, I've had a few questions about him, but he was withdrawn whilst on France duty at half-time, but that was apparently, Didier Deschamps said that was only a selection decision. He didn't feel that Konate was playing particularly well, so no injury concerns there as far as we're aware. So the hope should be that he will be available, and of course he will be straight into that starting 11. Now, of course, there are a couple of other selection decisions that are being debated, and one of them I've seen a lot during the international break is about Federico Chiesa and whether after his goal he scored in the final against Newcastle, brilliantly taken, does he deserve more chances, and does he deserve more chances maybe in that central area where Liverpool, nobody's really nailed down that starting spot, have they, in the number 9 position, neither Jota or Darwin Núñez. So could that be an opportunity for Chiesa? Now, the manager was asked about Chiesa and the fact he hasn't had many minutes this season, and he didn't really talk about the central role very much, because he said, look, he's had injuries, and also he's in competition with Mo Salah, and I don't think you can deny that Mo has had a good season, which is a fair way of putting it. But I do wonder whether there are a few opportunities coming up for him in that central role. As I say, you've been using Luis Diaz there fairly frequently. He is a left winger by trade. Diogo Jota hasn't been fit, and then when he's come back in, hasn't played particularly well. And Darwin Núñez is Darwin Núñez, typically quite up and down. So you do wonder whether there are going to be opportunities for Chiesa, even if that's more regularly as a substitute in the final stages of this season, to come in as a central striker, because he's definitely got the finishing prowess, the pace, the ability to play in that area. So it'd be very interesting to see if that happens. The one thing I would be cautious about is maybe him starting tomorrow's game in that position, because look, Liverpool are 12 points clear in the Premier League. They've got 9 games left now to kind of seal that Premier League title, and is this the time really to experiment with that? I think if the manager's going to try it, maybe do it late in games rather than from the start. But it would be interesting to see if Chiesa does get more minutes, because I think he needs to, if he is going to be part of this squad going into next season, because it's been a really, really disappointing season for him on a personal level, hasn't it? And just one more thing I want to touch on from this press conference as well, that the manager was asked about set piece. Has been a bit of a discussion point again over the international break, or just generally through this season. It was put to him that 26% of all the goals that Liverpool have conceded in the Premier League this season have come from set pieces. Meanwhile, Everton have scored 41% of their goals from set pieces, so it could be a decisive factor in the game tomorrow. But the manager shot down the idea that Liverpool have any sort of set piece problem. He said that Liverpool are the best defensively from corners so far this season. He also said we don't concede many goals, so the fact it's 26% is possibly more reflective of the fact we don't give up many goals at all, rather than the fact that we've got a huge problem with set pieces. Though he did talk about wants Liverpool to be better at attacking set pieces. That's been something they've been not particularly great at this season, so he does want to see improvement there. But he talks a lot about the fact that you want to have a balance in set piece goals in games, whether that's you score one, the opposition score one, or neither side score a set piece goal. He never wants a negative balance, because that puts the opposition one goal up, in a game, doesn't it? And it gives them the chance to win a game without really creating an open play opportunity. So he doesn't want that, and that's something he'll want to keep an eye on for tomorrow, is to make sure Liverpool are in a positive set piece balance, or just a balance generally in set pieces, so that doesn't give Everton any advantages. But we will have to see how they go in terms of that. So I'm going to wrap it up there anyway. Do let me know how you're feeling about this game. You're looking forward to Liverpool being back in action, and how do you think the manager's going to select his team? What's that going to look like for Everton, and how do you think Liverpool are going to get on generally? And do let me know your thoughts on the Trent situation as well, and his refusal pretty much to address that. I'm always interested to hear what you guys think. But I'm going to wrap it up there. Of course, I'll be at Anfield tomorrow for the game, so very much looking forward to being back and having some games to talk about rather than speculation. So very excited for that. And if you don't subscribe, do make sure you do, so you can catch my match review. And of course, likes are always massively appreciated. So I'll leave it there and say I'll see you guys very soon.